Howard Hughes, Aviator. That's the name of the book I found, so I figured I named that after it. Howard Hughes was a very interesting man that I'm surprised we don't hear too much more about. He was one of those people. He just wanted to do everything. He was known as one of the most influential people of his time. He was a businessman. He was an investor. He was an engineer. He was a film director. He was a philanthropist, and most importantly to us, he was a record-setting pilot. He was one of those guys. He had constant worsening OCD. So he was very eccentric. He went from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next. Another thing I don't have on here is he worked in the medical field too. But Howard Hughes' early life. So Howard Robard Hughes Jr. Yeah, that's not a typo. It's not like Robert. It's Robard. I thought that was cool. Was born on December 24th, 1905 in Humble, Texas. It's actually really weird because the only source of info that they have, this is when they said he was born, but his baptism record shows September 24th, 1905 in like Indiana. So that was very confusing, but his father was a very successful inventor and a businessman, and Hughes greatly followed in his footsteps. He was at a very young age working on stuff. When he was 11, he built Houston's first wireless transmitting radio or wireless radio transmitter. And then when he was 12, he was noticed in the paper because he took his dad's steam engine and he built a motorized bike out of parts from it, which I don't know about you guys, but at 11, I was not building wireless radios. I was like outside playing with chalk and on the concrete or eating Play-Doh or something. No, I don't think I was eating Play-Doh at 11, but so he was even as a kid, he was very advanced. And he went to college and he worked on everything. And then things got rough and his parents got really sick. His mom died first, and then his dad died like a year later. And so after his parents got sick and died, he dropped out of college. He moved to LA with his new wife, and he wanted to be a filmmaker. That was his new thing. He wanted to work as a filmmaker and make movies. He moved out there. One of his friends convinced him immediately to fund a short film that his friend was going to star in and had written called Swell Hogan. It failed. It was bad. And nobody wanted, it was terrible. Nobody wanted to watch it. And so he went to his editor and was like, please try to fix this. And they couldn't fix it at all. So he had it destroyed. He then decided to go on to produce Everybody's Acting and Two Arabian Nights. They were his next two films. These were successful. They achieved financial success, and Two Arabian Nights won the first Academy Award for Best Director of a Comedy Picture. He then made some more films, The Racket, The Front Page. They were also nominated for Academy Awards. And he came to his big film, Hell's Angels. He spent $3.5 million to make this flying film in 1930. And it received one Academy Award for Best Cinematography. And then after that, he produced Scarface, which it was delayed by the concern over the violence in it, but it was put out. And then Outlaw premiered in 1943, featuring Jane Russell. This was one of the movies where she wore some revealing stuff, so it did pretty well. I mean, that's not the only thing that'll make it do well, but it made it do well. And then he moved into aviation. He'd always been involved in aviation. He always liked it. He learned how to fly, but he was now very interested. And so in 1932, he founded the Hughes Aircraft Company. He rented out a quarter of a Lockheed Aircraft Corporation hangar, and he decided to start building his H-1 racer. And then, oddly enough, as successful as he is, he used an alias. He started going under a fake name and wanted to work. He wanted to work for American Airlines, but he worked as a baggage handler. And then after being a baggage handler, he eventually promoted himself to co-pilot. He worked it until people discovered who he actually was. So crashes. He suffered from 4 major crashes in his life, and these gave him some problems. He had chronic pain because of it. It was very hard for him. But one of them was in a Thomas More Scout, and it was while he was filming Hells Angels. He did a lot of the flying in it. One was while he was setting the airspeed record in the Hughes racer. He had a crash. There's one at Lake Mead in 1943, and then he almost died in the crash of the Hughes XF11 in 1946. So Hughes was actually a pretty big guy in aviation. He set many world records. He set the land speed record of 352 miles an hour in the H-1 on September 13th, 1935. And this was the last time in history that a plane built by someone private, not like a big company, was succeeded at this. There were two guys that had kind of beat him for this before. Giuseppe Motta, he hit 362 miles an hour in 1929, and George Stainforth reached 407.5 miles an hour in a 31. But these were both in seaplanes, so he had the airspeed record in a land plane. And then in 1937, he took that same H-1 racer and he put longer wings on it. And now he set the transcontinental airspeed record, and he flew from LA to Newark in 7.5 hours. And then even further, he went on to complete a flight around the world in 91 hours on July 14th, 1938. I think it was exactly 3 days, 19 hours, and 17 minutes he flew around the world. The previous record before this was 186 hours, 7 days, 18 hours, and 49 minutes. He crushed that record. He absolutely blew it out of the water. I think it said he beat the other guy by like 4 days. And that's unbelievable. That's ridiculous. But then he got his medical institute. He was getting towards the end of his career. He put in his will that he wanted to have a medical institute made. And he was working on all this, and he created the Howard Hughes Medical Institute in Miami in 1953. And his goal was mainly biomedical research. And in Hughes' words, he said he's trying to understand the genesis of life itself, because he's always been interested in science and technology. As when he was a kid, he was building. And when the IRS came for a lot of it, he ended up selling or giving all of the stock from his Hughes Aircraft Company, which was very, very popular. He gave it to the Institute. And so his company that had worked as a defense company for World War II, had built all these planes. It was now a for-profit entity of this fully tax-exempt charity. So throughout his life, he did a lot. I mean, he was one of those guys that did everything, and I'm surprised that I haven't heard more about him, because he was one of, it seems like, the most influential people. Like I said at the beginning, one of the most influential people, not just in aviation, but in so many different fields. And these were the sources I used.